How's it going, Ding Dongs? Welcome back to Ding Dong Drift. My microphone on my other camera is currently dead, so I'm using my new Insta360 Ace Pro 2, which is basically just an action camera. It's a much better action camera than what you're probably used to with like GoPros and other stuff. This camera has a flip-up screen, 8K, it can do 4K 120. The specs are honestly crazy. It has 2 processors on it. It can do crazy good low light. So if you want to check it out, I have a link in the description if you're in the market for a new action camera, but that's besides the point. Today, we're finally gluing the wide body on. In the last video, we got it prepped up, fitting right, and I actually did a little more work, and you can see I have this side fitting nicely now. Everything lines up perfectly. It just needs to be pushed down a little bit. All I got to do is get this down to bare metal, and I have glue already. Start gluing this all on. First thing I got to do is take it off, prep this side, and then just clean this side, and then we gotta sand the underside of the wide body where it's actually gonna attach to the car. I'm gonna glue it everywhere so that I can take the bolts out, which will make it a lot easier to do the body work because I don't have to worry about bolts and sanding around them. But I am gonna try to only attach it critical spots. So obviously we'll have some glue here, we'll have some glue here. This whole area will have glue. Remember, I printed these vents in the design already, and I also have wheel wells that are already printed in the design. I don't wanna glue this panel on extremely well so that I can actually remove it in one piece, so then I can make a mold of the inside after I make a mold of the outside. Pull these panels off and start prepping the metal. All right, we're back on the main camera. Microphone's charged. Yeah, hopefully everything works now. As you saw in the time lapses, I got everything cleaned up down to bare metal because the glue that I'm using requires bare metal. And if you're wondering, the glue that I am using is 3M08115. And this is 08571. This stuff is insanely strong. It's like 3,000 pounds of tensile strength. It's insane. Like if you watch my video where I'm removing the wide body, the old one, it was very hard to get it off. That's why I mentioned it earlier. I'm going to only apply small dabs of it in critical areas where I don't want the wide body to move, but overall it's gonna be just like kind of barely hanging on because I wanna, you know, smooth it out, do everything, and then pull a mold off of it, pull it right off the car right away, and do the inside because like I said, the wheel well is a separate part, and I'm gonna be pulling a mold off of this in a new, interesting way that I haven't done before. And I think it's gonna be an interesting test. If you don't wanna miss that, make sure you subscribe. I have the glue warmed up. It's still not that warm. It's like, it was a high of 45 today, and it's like, what is it, 60 in the garage? It's 55 in the garage. So it's still not that warm. So the glue was sitting on my printer while it was printing, and the glue is now really warmed up. So hopefully it's able to cure nicely. It does only have like an hour working time, so I gotta be pretty quick with it. Have everything ready. When I have all the bolts ready, we're just gonna put some glue on, attach the wide body. So get back on the Ace Pro 2 for the time lapse and finish this up. All right, as you can see, the whole wide body is attached. Everything is glued on. I had to do some weird clamping because everything's curved and it's really hard to clamp stuff. I also heated these up with a torch and shaped them perfectly so they contour everything as nicely. This one I broke and I had to rebuild it with my 3D pen. I did that. That was fun. Overall though, everything fits nicely. The gap here is pretty decent. As you can see, I used my finger with a glove to smooth all the glue out so it's not bulging out. I also had to put a self-tapper in here. This spot was lifting up a little bit. Tomorrow, It's looking like it's gonna be about 50 degrees, which will be perfect to start placing the first layer of epoxy on everything and start smoothing this out. I'll be back tomorrow. Well, it's a beautiful day. It's like 52 degrees outside. The wide body is fully glued on. You can see I took the bolts out. I didn't glue these on though, and now I'm regretting it. I'm probably gonna glue them on, or maybe I'll just leave them. I don't know, we'll see. You can see everything's nice and smooth. Everything's nice and aligned. The glue isn't completely dry, but it's close enough that I can start sanding this. And today what we're gonna do is cover the whole thing in epoxy. I guess let's just start sanding. But before we do that, I have some bad news. Due to the sudden rise of temperatures, the Ding Dong domain is no longer. Oh wow, Teddy left his ball in there too. Sad, I know. What can you do though, you know? Global warming. As you can see, everything is now sanded. This is the part of the process where you can go as far as you want or as little as you want. You can just scuff it up and start doing body work, or what I like to do is smooth it out as much as possible, especially between the seams. So you'll do like a layer of Bondo here, and you'll sand it down, and then you'll hit the high spot first with the plastic, and then you have to do another layer of Bondo. And then you have to use a block sander and try to get it smooth from that point on, and it's just, you keep building up and building up. Eventually you're gonna end up with a not so flat panel. So I think it's best, get it as smooth as possible. There's almost no seams I can feel between the panels. That's how you want it. Obviously there's some spots like here where this is low, where you can see it's darker. That's where it's obviously lower and this is higher. There's nothing I can do about those because when I glue them together, they just weren't perfectly aligned. That's gonna happen, but I do think this is the best time to do most of the sanding. Now for epoxy, I'm using Composite Envision's thin epoxy resin. I like to use thin epoxy resin. It flows really nicely into all the crevices and everything. You can use like a medium or even thick epoxy. It just obviously won't spread out so nicely and you'll have to do a little more sanding. And then I also use the Fast Cure hardener, which goes in combination with why I'm using the thin epoxy resin. So with the thin epoxy resin, you obviously lose more to dripping and stuff, but because I'm using the Fast Cure, I can do multiple layers in like 2 hours instead of waiting, you know, a long ass time for the medium cure epoxy to harden, and then it doesn't spread as well and I have to sand it. So I don't know if that makes sense, but that's just my reasoning. If you want to pick up the same epoxy that I use, check out Composite Envisions. I have the link in the description. And if you're ordering from them, leave a note saying that I sent them to you. Support the businesses that support me. So let's mix this up. Also, I warmed the epoxy up on my 3D printer. It's still only 50 something outside, and epoxies like to cure at around 70 degrees. So I like to warm the actual epoxy itself up. It cools down pretty quickly as it spreads, but it just, I think, helps maybe a little bit. All right, it's the next day, and as you can see, I've already been sanding. I have one side done. See, this side is completely sanded. It's ready for a second coat after I fill some of these gaps, but I'm gonna fill the gaps together on both sides. I'm gonna throw it on the time lapse now, get this side sanded down, get it all smoothed out, and we'll start filling the gaps, and I'll show you how I'm gonna do that. All right, both sides are sanded. I haven't sanded here though. Gotta hand sand this part. Overall, it's basically done. So now what I have to do is fill in all the gaps. And you might be thinking, probably just use Bondo, but I'm not going to. And the reason is because Bondo doesn't have any like adhesive properties. You know, it's pretty weak in terms of a glue. And since we have something that is in pieces, we want it to be as strong as possible for the mold making process, because when you pull a mold off of it, you don't want it to just shatter or break apart. So what I am gonna use is more panel bond. So as with anything, you want a clean surface. So I'm just gonna wipe it down with a microfiber. This will also reveal cracks a little better, or not cracks, the gaps. And the reason you wanna wipe off the dust is because we're also going to be tape over all of the glue. And you've probably seen me do this in like the bumper video where I assembled the bumper, filling any gaps. This is the way to go for 3D prints. Yeah, you can just push it down with your finger or try to get as much of it in here as possible. It's probably going to force itself out, especially as it heats up. Try to get as much of it in, but with the gun, you see I'm just applying a tiny little bead to everything. All right, so now that I have the glue applied, or the panel bond, cut my tape. With pressure, apply it. And that's gonna spread the glue out and push it into gap. So now you have a nice deep penetration, something you've never experienced, and it's gonna be a lot less to sand. So I'm gonna do the rest, and we're gonna let this cure and maybe apply another coat tomorrow, or maybe I'll end the video here, we'll see. I don't know. Well, there we have it. Everything's nice and dry now. Everything's hard, no more gaps. There's still some small gaps, but those will get filled in with some body filler and some spot putty and stuff. It's looking pretty good. It's looking pretty damn good. Smooth that is already. Like, you can't even feel it or see it, nothing. It's just one coat of epoxy so far. This process is literally so easy. Same thing with this side. Look at that. You can't even, there's nothing. So one more coat of epoxy. I don't think I'm gonna even need to do any body filler, except for that one area that I was talking about where the panels don't line up. And I think there was one here. Yeah, right here. There's a bit of a gap here where this piece broke off. I kind of glued it back on, so I gotta build this back up. And you see there's kind of bit of a gap here and stuff. It's very windy outside and very cold. It's 10 degrees colder today than it was yesterday, so I think I'm gonna skip today. I'm gonna rest a little bit. My back's hurting from all the sanding, and we'll be back in another video to continue doing the body work. I'm also gonna start doing the doors, so that will be in the next video as well, because I wanna have the gap perfect, so I have to have the door printed and glued on and everything so that I can make the panel gap perfect. I also have to print these side skirts because I want this gap to be perfect and this gap to be perfect. It's quite a bit of gaps that I need to make perfect. So the door and side skirt will have to be printed in the next video so that I can continue working. The side skirt, I'm actually gonna print the entire thing instead of gluing it onto the existing side skirt, because as you know, I'm selling the old wide body. The side skirts work with the old wide body, so those are for sale as well. If you'd want my old wide body with the crazy, you know, Lexus RX bumper that I created from scratch, it's $2,500. If you want to arrange shipping, you can do that. So DM me on Instagram or whatever if you want to buy it. Also check out the Patreon for early updates as well as progress and behind the scenes and everything. I post almost every day, or at least I try to post every day, of all the progress and steps that I'm taking to make this, as well as 3D files, discounts on merch and all my 3D printed products. I can even help you with your 3D modeling if you join the top tier. That's gonna be it for this one, Ding Dongs. Thank you so much for watching. Peace out, stay sweet, and I'll see you guys next week.
Do you have your passport?